I think the Queen's sense of duty, her service, her tolerance, and her unshakable commitment to others have always meant a great deal to me. It all began quietly, so quietly that almost no one outside a small circle within the palace realized what was happening. The evening air over London carried a familiar chill, the kind that settles in just before the city drifts to sleep, when the skyline's lights shimmer faintly through the fog. At a discreet airfield on the outskirts of the city, a private jet waited with its engines softly humming. There were no photographers, no flashing cameras, and no palace press officers issuing polite statements about the heir to the throne schedule. This flight wasn't listed on any public calendar, and even some of the prince's closest aides had no idea where he was going. Moments later, the jet lifted into the night, its lights vanishing into the clouds. The only passenger on board was Prince William, the future king of the United Kingdom, flying alone toward Scotland. To those who have known him all his life, William has always been a calm and composed man. Warm, solid, steeped in a sense of duty. He rarely lets emotion break his rhythm. In the days leading up to that night, however, something was different. His trademark smile looked forced, his laughter less spontaneous, and though he was polite to a fault, his thoughts seemed elsewhere. Behind every well-wisher's handshake and every photo, there was a quiet tension. He continued to perform every royal duty with aplomb, but the ease had gone. Weeks before his sudden trip north, subtle changes crept into his daily routine. William began spending long hours alone in his study at Kensington Palace. Meetings that were once lively became brief and formal. According to staff, a strange silence filled the halls. He started communicating through handwritten notes rather than speaking face-to-face, which to the open and approachable prince they knew was utterly out of character. At a Manchester charity event, William gave one of his stock homilies on community and mental health. To all outward appearances, it was perfect. He smiled, thanked the organizers, and talked about resilience and compassion. But for those who knew how to look, the difference was there to see. His gaze was distant, his pauses between sentences fractionally too long, as if reins were being pulled on thoughts he couldn't say aloud. Later, when the event ended, an aide quietly slipped him a folded note. For an instant, his expression altered not dramatically, but enough to reveal a flicker of shadow before he tucked the paper away and departed without his customary wave to reporters. That night, his car was seen gliding through the misty Windsor grounds, headlights cutting through the fog. There were no bodyguards, no royal convoy, just William, driving alone, his hands gripping the steering wheel, the dim dashboard light casting a pale glow across his face. Those who saw him later said he stayed awake past midnight, pacing his study in silence. Whatever that note contained, it had clearly shaken him. By morning, he was gone. Aviation enthusiasts online began to notice a private jet leaving a small London airfield under an alias bound for Scotland. Within hours, rumors flooded social media. Some claimed there had been a family emergency at Balmoral. Others whispered of a personal crisis. In a family where every movement is planned with precision, the sudden disappearance of the heir to the throne caused alarm. Inside the palace, confusion turned concern. Royal travel is always meticulously prepared, security, communication, contingency plans. But this time, none of it was done. The flight plan had been filed under a false name, and even senior aides didn't know until the plane was already in the air. This wasn't official business. It was personal. Later that night, the jet touched down in Scotland, rain pouring over a dark runway. The distant highlands glimmered faintly through the storm. There were no cameras, no officials, just one car waiting. Without a word, William stepped into the rain. The driver didn't say a word as they meandered down winding roads toward Balmoral Castle, the most private refuge of the royal family. For generations, Balmoral had been a retreat, a sanctuary where Queen Elizabeth found her peace after tragedy, a place for family to get away from an unending spotlight. Now it was his turn. His arrival was kept secret. Only a few staff were informed. The estate was sealed off, and access roads were quietly restricted. Behind those ancient stone walls, the prince began to face something that would confront him more profoundly than any encounter he had so far experienced. According to sources close to the royal household, William's sudden trip was motivated by confidential information he had obtained several days earlier. private reports, documents, and messages revealing something deeply unsettling. None outside his closest circle knows exactly what they contained, but it was devastating, according to the people who saw his reaction. The information struck not only at his public life, but his private one, shaking his trust in people he had long relied on and reopening old wounds that had never truly healed. At Balmoral, William walked alone to the mist-covered fields on his first full day, the sound of rain whispering through the leaves. Aides said he spoke with almost no one, as if searching for clarity, the kind only Scotland can provide. In the days that followed, a small cluster of staff, advisors who had arrived by stealth from London in unmarked cars, spent hours shut away behind closed doors reviewing the documents, discussing what it meant, weighing the next steps. William listened more than he spoke. His face was stoic, but his silence was heavy. He would stand by the window at times, looking out over the unending sprawl of hills and forest, the same view his grandmother once loved, the same landscape his mother had cherished. And in the stillness, he seemed to carry the weight of his family's legacy, the future of the crown, and the quiet burden of knowing some truths can never be unlearned. The prince often walked to the small chapel on the grounds, where staff sometimes saw candlelight flickering long after midnight. He would sit alone in the pews, head bowed and hands clasped, unmoving for hours. Some thought he was praying. Others believed he was reflecting. In truth, he was doing both, searching for strength, for something greater than duty, something to help him bear the weight of what he now knew. During those long nights, the presence of his mother filled his thoughts. The memory of Princess Diana had always been close, but in Balmoral's silence, it felt almost tangible. It was there she had once brought him and Harry as boys, teaching them to find comfort in nature when the world felt heavy. As he walked the familiar paths, he could almost hear her voice, gentle and reassuring, reminding him to stay true to himself, no matter the pressure. In the castle library, he discovered old letters and notes from his grandmother's archives, including one handwritten by Diana years before her passing. She wrote of truth, integrity, and her hope that her sons would have the courage to be honest, even when silence seemed easier. Those words echoed in his mind, reminding him of what had always set her apart, her belief in love, compassion, and truth, even at great cost. William began to write in a notebook, filling pages with reflections, memories, and questions. It wasn't a plan or a speech, but a way to make sense of what he felt. What at one time had seemed like betrayal and confusion was now gradually beginning to take on a sense of purpose. The painful truths that had been revealed to him had given him the opportunity to fulfill what his mother had always hoped, that he would lead with honesty. A week on, those who saw him at Balmoral thought the heaviness hadn't gone, but it had lifted a little. He stood straighter, his expression calm but resolute. Scotland had given him space to breathe. Its silence had steadied him. The man who had arrived burdened by confusion was starting to find direction. But when he returned to London, the calm of the Highlands dissipated quickly. The palace was on edge, the press restless, and rumors of a royal crisis filled headlines. A terse palace statement called the trip a period of private reflection, which only piqued interest more. Inside Kensington Palace, the mood was guarded, hushed-toned silence when the prince approached. All the same, those who knew him best sensed that he'd changed. He carried something new, a quiet strength. Even as royal duties resumed meetings and ceremonies, state functions, something inside him had shifted. William was no longer the man who smiled politely through an endless succession of appearances. There was weight in his eyes, the air of someone who has battled pain and prevailed. He listened more closely, asked tougher questions, and insisted on honesty over historic tradition. His time in the Highlands had washed away the trivial, leaving clarity behind him. In private, he reflected on what he had dug up before his flight. Still secret, the details had changed how he regarded the concepts of trust and loyalty. He now knew truth and power was fragile, and silence, while comforting, could become poison. With a newfound determination to change that, he leaned on Catherine's warmth and steadiness. She brought laughter back into their home and helped their children's joy fill the halls once more. In their play, William found peace and remembered why the weight on his shoulders was worth it. The media continued to speculate, but he didn't reply. His silence wasn't avoidance, it was strength. He had learned that truth needn't be screamed. It need only be lived. Behind the scenes, he began updating royal operations, pushing for transparency in charitable funds, encouraging more openness in communication with the public. He felt trust, not distance, was key to the monarchy's survival. Later into the night, when others had gone to bed, lights from his study continued to burn. Sometimes he read old letters, his mother's handwriting, his grandmother's musings on duty, and sometimes he wrote his own thoughts, never meant for anyone else. No longer was he training to be a king, but to redefine what it meant to be one. The Scotland trip had taught him this much. The crown wasn't something passed down. It was something entrusted, and real strength came only with vulnerability. Weeks later, while visiting a London Veterans Community project, cameras captured his sincerity. A veteran spoke to William about loss and resilience, to which he softly responded, "Sometimes we learn more about ourselves in silence than we ever do in comfort." The words were not at all complicated, but really personal. People spoke about a calm power emanating from him, rooted not in some stiff authority, but in authenticity. He did not need any longer to make a case for himself. He just showed leadership with honesty, thus commanding respect rather than mere admiration. His relationship with his father began to change, too. Early meetings had been tense, old wisdom clashing with new conviction. But over time, Charles saw that in William's determination lay sincerity, not rebellion. Quiet evenings at Windsor turned into real conversations between father and son. William once told him, "We can't live behind a curtain forever. If people can't trust us to be honest, they won't trust us to lead." The king said little, but there was understanding in his eyes. Public admiration for William grew steadily. He had become a symbol of change within tradition, a man who balanced duty with humanity. Even skeptics saw in him someone trying to lead differently.